What is equity in real estate? Equity is the difference between any amounts owed and the amount that something is worth. Equity can change because market value can change. A house is worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. So if you have a $500,000 house, that's an assumption unless and until somebody buys it and proves that it's a $500,000 house. So if you owe $300,000 and you sell it for $500,000, then your equity was $200,000. But equity is theoretical until you enter into a contract at a certain price. Now, sellers can finance their equity by entering into a sale contract for a grand total of $500,000 when their underlying debt is $300,000. Whether or not you sell it outright or provide seller financing, the equity is the difference between the total sale price or the appraised value and the amount of debt on the property. When somebody goes to refinance their house, an appraiser will come out and say, I think the market value for this house is $497,000. Oh, darn, I was shooting for 500. Well, that's what I've appraised it at. That's an official appraisal. So then your equity is actually 197,000 because you owe 300 and I'm saying it's worth 497. That's equity. It's just the amount of value that's attributable to one or more parties in the transaction. You could say that the bank has 300,000 equity in that property because if it sells, they're getting paid their liquidated balance. But we don't treat it. It's technically that's not really how that works. They don't have equity in a property because that would indicate some sort of ownership. So equitable interest is not the same as equity. Equitable, we need to look at the definition of the term equitable. It's like in my head, I'm going to explain in layman. Somebody on the call, please look up equitable, the definition. But the way that comes across in my head is someone's effective use, benefit, entitlement, something along those lines. Equitable interest is something that is marketable, defensible, attackable. That's probably not the best example, but equitable interest means something that's real and has to be addressed. Who's got my definition of equitable?
So I typed it into ChatGPT, and it basically just says equitable pertains to fairness, justice, and moral principles, both in legal context and general discussions of right and wrong.
So acting equitably is like acting fair in a righteous manner.
Yeah.
So we generally want to act equitably to people. So I guess we do need to further define equitable interest. You could say, what's my fair interest in this property? What's my fair interest in whatever? But my equitable interest may not be the same as my equity in the property. I may have an equitable interest that doesn't result in any dollars. My equitable interest in a property may be my right to buy it. But to be fair, equitable in that sense, in the moral justice sense, I have an interest in the property if I have an agreement to sell an exclusive option to purchase, for example. I have an equitable interest in the property that must be dealt with in a sale situation. They may convert my equitable interest into a dollar amount that I agreed to just be bought out. So a contract for deed situation where the seller holds title, they hold fee title, but the buyer has equitable title. What? Fee title is the technical. Yes, legal ownership is still fee title with the seller. Equitable title, by comparison, is the buyer who's making payments for all intents and purposes, as far as fairness goes, as far as the law goes, righteousness and justice goes. They have some equitable interest in that property, which is going to change over time. The more payments they make, the more interest they're going to have in that property, more vesting they'll have there. But the seller who holds fee title legally still owns the property, can't just go off and do something willy-nilly without addressing the person's equitable interest. And again, that may be variable as the market goes up, as debt gets paid down, as promises are made or not made. Then the courts may judge that somebody's equitable interest is null and void or is worth X number of dollars, or the parties can arrange a deal between themselves and just renegotiate what that equitable interest in the property is. Usually equitable interest is going to be ultimately worked out to be some sort of dollar amount. But just having an equitable interest is not always represented by dollars. It's represented as some sort of rights or entitlement related to the property. My equitable interest may entitle me to traipse across the yard at any time, or to do cartwheels on their across the backyard and into the pool or something like that. Who knows? Your equitable interest doesn't have to actually be $700 worth of value or 700,000. However, if my neighbor has a pool and I sign a contract with them that says I have the right to, like, maybe I rake his yard all the time, and in exchange for raking his yard and keeping the leaves out of the pool, my family gets to swim in his pool. Well, if we have that arrangement for 10 years and then he sells the house, I've got established use. I may say, hey, I have equitable interest in that property. I have a long-standing arrangement that gets me the benefit of using their pool, and now they're selling the property. I have a claim, an established claim to the use of that pool. This is a little bit outlandish, but it could go through the court system. My family has made, for 10 years, we have relied upon our ability to swim in that pool. We have invested into trimming the trees to minimize how many leaves fall and land in the pool, to minimize pool maintenance. Like, there's a real exchange of value between me and my neighbor in this scenario. And I can invest forward in that transaction by offering to trim the trees and keep branches out from over the pool, and buying a leaf blower to make it more effective, or whatever the heck I want to do. I have an equitable interest. And so when my neighbor sells their property, this is a stretch, but somebody could take it to court. And the court may have to determine that the economic value of my equity in that property using their pool is $500 a year. And they award me a one-time payout of $500, of $5,000, or whatever. It could get that. That's some sort of equitable interest. Now, that's especially if it was documented with a contract. But that's my interest in the property. Make sense?
Yeah.
Again, there's
So
unlimited circumstances we could think up of.
right. So for us, would that be like when somebody's got a memorandum of contract filed?
Bingo.
Then okay.
My equitable interest in a memorandum of contract is I have the rights to buy the property at this specified price in this specified timeline. So anybody trying to do something else injures my position in the property. Because if I have the right to buy a property at $350,000 and I know I can sell it for $375,000, then theoretically I've got $25,000 that I'm waiting to receive out of that deal. And when somebody stalls that or causes a problem that stops that transaction from going through, I'm injured to the tune of approximately $25,000. Now, actually determining that value while it's still theoretical is very tough. But it's kind of like opportunity cost. Right now, I'm training you. I could be playing catch with my kids. What's the value? What's the difference? What's the value there? The opportunity cost is hard to affix realistically. And then in the court system, you can expect a court case to cost anywhere from $6,000 to $15,000 pretty easily to get a judgment against somebody. So if your profit margin is less than $20,000, probably not worth. Just walk away. But if you've got a big fat check of $75,000, $100,000, it may be worth taking to the courts. So equitable interest, I like the fairness, justice, the right and wrong sort of concept. You could just say my equitable interest is represented by a statement. In all fairness, I have rights to ABC, and that may have monetary value or it may not. My equitable interest in a property may be that I bought a plot of land on the other side of it where I keep a bunch of cattle. And the easiest way to access my plot of land that's landlocked is to drive across the corner of your property to get there. And you've allowed me to do that for year after year after year. Then all of a sudden you put up a fence and I'm like, hey, I can't access my property anymore. You can't do that to me. Well, it's my property. I can put up a fence if I want. No, I have established use of the property. You've allowed me to do this for 7 years. You cannot put up a fence and stop me from accessing my other plot of land. I have equitable interest in your property, whether documented or not, because of the established regular use of the property in this fashion that you have never objected to. So in all fairness, I have equitable interest in your property. And you need to put gates up and I have a key to those gates to get through. Or provide me an alternate route. You see how equitable interest can be established without even a contract? So if you sold the property and the new owner says, no, you're not driving through my yard anymore. Oh, yes, I am. And that has gone to court more than once in the US. Somebody sells a property and they don't want to allow right of way or access through to somebody who has established use. Sorry, too bad. You got to let them drive through. That's the way they've been accessing their property that way. Now, that's only if it would be an undue burden to do something else, right? If the county had already built a road straight to my other property and this was just a shortcut, they could say, go kick rocks, take the regular road. It takes 30 seconds longer. Get over it. So what's fair and right? If there is direct access through a normal means, is it fair and right for me to require somebody not to put up a fence? No. So my equitable interest could be wiped out by the county bringing in a new road that crosses past my other property that I can now access directly. Is it a shortcut that my neighbor may have allowed or may continue to allow for 5 years to go through their yard? Sure. But if they sold the property, the new buyer could say, no, you don't cut through my yard. There's a street. Go use the street. And my equitable interest is gone. We like it? The thinking makes sense?
Yeah. And then can I ask, in the case, because the example you use or the mention you made yesterday when it came to novations in the scenario of the rehab and sell type of contract, that the investor or person B, they put in funds in order to rehab, and they put in the sweat equity, the work that goes into it, which is probably why they are able to mark up the price a bit as well for the work that went in as well as the money that they put in.
Yep. So their equitable interest is the difference, or their equity. Their equitable interest is represented by dollars in this case. And that is equity in the deal itself. So I can gain equity to your property if we enter into an agreement to rehab and sell, where we establish the value in the front end by saying $200,000 sale price from you to me. We're establishing and just mutually agreeing, regardless of all other situations, $200,000 is the agreed upon value of the house right now before I start working on it. Now, if I start spending money and investing, whatever it sells for is my markup to keep. Or we could engage in, I keep half of the markup or whatever. I don't like, let's not complicate. You can get as complicated as you want. I strongly discourage. Establish a baseline and do your own work and establish the new sale price and keep the difference. My equitable interest is dollars. So my equity is the $75,000 between the first purchase price and the final sale price in that novation situation or the agreement to rehab and sell. My equity is not how many dollars I spent. The dollars I spend do get me, in a legal sense, in fairness sense, the dollars I spend investing into the property do get me equitable interest in the property, but it's not necessarily dollar for dollar. It may or may not be. We can prove out my equity or my equitable interest in dollars by actually selling the property and seeing for what it sells. Whatever it sells for minus expenses, there you go.